All right, good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? I know we're starting a little bit early, but I thought, why not get it started? Everyone's seated and eating, and everyone looks happy. So, might as well get started. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Dave Peppinger. I'm the chair of City Club Missoula, and welcome to our May Forum. So before I get into a bunch of stuff, let me kind of do some thank yous. For some of the new people here, City Club we have a deep commitment to civility and civil discourse. So even when discussing challenging issues, please be aware of that, right? Before getting into the forum, let me give the thank yous. So thank you to Missoula Community Access Television, which records forums as part of their media assistance grants nonprofit organizations. MCAT serves our community on cable channels 189 and 190. MCAT occasionally live streams our forums on its local live platform as well. You can also find past videos on our City Club Missoula forum on our webpage. Just click on the video button and you'll be able to see them all. Special thank you to our sponsors, especially those at the executive level. Without them, we wouldn't be putting these forums on. So they are Blackfoot Communications and First Security Bank. Our executive level sponsors are key partners in helping to expand audience access and public awareness for upcoming forums. We're grateful to all of our sponsors and we invite you to join. And of course, thanks to the board of directors, their tireless efforts at doing this, and this is a challenge every month, but they do a great job of it. So. And then Yenny. Who can forget Yenny? She's our executive administrative assistant. She helps put these forums together and make everything run nice and smooth. So thank you, Yenny. I know she doesn't like me saying that. So, our speakers for today's panel are Stacie Anderson, City Council Ward 5, Gordy Hughes, Fire Chief, and then we've got Geoff Badenoch. So let me kind of go over their bios real quick, and then I will leave the floor to them. So I'll start off with Geoff. He attended University of Montana, where he received both his undergraduate political science in 1977, a graduate's degree, Master of Public Administration with an emphasis on urban studies in 1982. Geoff began working at the Missoula Redevelopment Agency in 1982 and served as the executive director beginning October of 1985. Geoff left the MRA in January of 2004. Since then, he has practiced private project management consulting and as a community volunteer. In addition to his professional obligations, Geoff served on the supervisory committee of the Clearwater Credit Union for over 20 years. On this board, is on the board of Missoula League of Women Voters and formerly served as a foundation for the Missoula Public Library. Previously, he served as chair of the Missoula County Election Advisory Committee and as a member of the City Club Missoula Board. Thank you. He's just entered service as a volunteer docent at the Montana Museum of Art and Culture. Geoff was elected to the City of Missoula Local Government Study Commission and co-authored the Missoula City Charter, which was adopted by the voters in Missoula of 1996. I hear he's a poet, too. Okay, maybe not. Next, we have Councilwoman Stacie Anderson. She represents Ward 5, which is the South Hills, Miller Creek, Linda Vista part of Missoula. She's currently in the middle of serving her second term on council and is the chair of the Public Safety, Health, and Operations Committee. Stacie grew up in Kalispell, where her father was a firefighter, paramedic for the city of Kalispell. She's a proud graduate of the University of Montana. Go Grizz. I know I've got Gordy's right here. All right. Fire Chief Gordy Hughes, raised in Missoula, attending Rattlesnake Elementary School and Loyola High School. After high school, he enlisted in U.S. Coast Guard, serving 4 years. Upon returning to Missoula, Chief Hughes wanted to continue to serve and was hired with the Missoula Fire Department in August of 1993. Chief Hughes served on the engines for 13 years before moving to the Fire Prevention Bureau, progressing to the rank of Fire Marshal. Chief Hughes served 4 years as the Assistant Fire Chief and was appointed Fire Chief in January of 2022. When not serving his community, Chief Hughes enjoys spending time with his family and 2 sons enjoying Montana's outdoors. And with that, I believe Stacie begins or Geoff begins. Or sorry, Gordy wins. Gordy wins. All right. Whatever you want.
That's all right. Thanks, Dave, and thank you all for having us here today. It's my pleasure to be here and talk a little bit about your fire department in the city of Missoula and what we do in the community, and why this levy has come about, and what the ask is referencing the levy, and why this need is evident right now in today's world as far as emergency response, from responding to medical emergencies, fires, of course, hazardous materials responses, and everything else that life throws at us that nobody has an answer for. Seems like the fire department picks up all things emergency related or questionable actions out there in the community. As of late, our response with our mobile support team, which responds to persons in crisis of behavioral health emergencies. That unit is showing some great successes out in our community by providing an alternative for folks aside from going to the emergency room or to jail. We're diverting folks to proper resources and providing wraparound services for these individuals in our community that had no other place to go other than those 2 other options that I mentioned. But with further ado, our mission, plain and simple, and I look to former Chief Mike Painter, who brought me up as a young pup when I started in '93. Mike was one of my senior firefighters, and he drilled this into all the new firefighters, as did all of our senior firefighters and those that have gone before us. But we save lives, we protect property, and we ease pain and suffering, and that's very simple, but it's a hard motto to live up to. And right now, our grade is not an A+. It's more like a D in our response, as far as our response times to these emergencies. This graph that you see before you is an indication of our call volume from the last time we hired firefighters in the city, which was in 2008 to staff the newly constructed Station 5 in the Linda Vista area. As you can see, in 2008, our calls were 5,800 in that realm. This last year, we responded to 12,744 emergencies, calls for help. That's nearly double the call volume in that time span without adding a single firefighter to our operations staffing. And the operations staffing are those individuals that are staffed on the big red trucks responding to the emergency calls. We've added a lot to Missoula. We've annexed properties and added a geographical footprint much larger than what we were in 2008 as well, by the annexing the industrial park and the airport properties out there. We've grown by nearly 14 square miles since 2008 and added a large portion of new population as people are continually moving to Missoula. The mobile support team, as I mentioned, was stood up during COVID. Very trying time for everyone, but something that we took on with that need that I mentioned of no alternative response for persons in behavioral crisis. And as you look at those numbers and the contacts that we've made in our community to help persons, that truly speaks volumes. We are supporting not only the calls that we would respond to in the big red trucks if we did not have this resource available, but it supports Missoula's police officers. Predominantly, that coordinated response with PD saves on more critical crisis down the road. Our consequences with our increased call volume is we're not meeting our time responses set by the National Fire Protection Agency. Our golden standard is to respond to everyone's emergency within 6 minutes or less. Right now, we are surpassing that by 2 to 2.5 minutes over that national standard. What does that mean to everybody? Is that when seconds count in a cardiac arrest situation or a stroke to elicit life-saving interventions and critical care components, people's lives are at stake here. On the fire side of things, we'd like to promote an aggressive attack on structures so that we stop those fires at room and contents and not allow those fires to get past to a point where we're putting our firefighters at a greater risk of a flashover or backdraft situation where when they enter a structure by introducing oxygen, they can be in a situation where an explosion occurs and putting those firefighters at risk of bodily injury. Our collision calls, meaning when we have simultaneous calls occurring, we're nearly 50%, so almost 50% of the time when we're on a call, another call will come in requiring our response. I go back to the simple vehicle accident in my talks, and I think people can resonate with traffic on North Reserve and on a Friday. We'll use that example. If we have an accident on North Reserve, that takes 2 units out of service. That would be our stations 4 and station 1. 2 stations that are north of Clark Fork River. That leaves no other units available within their stations to respond to any emergencies north of the Clark Fork River. That would be Rattlesnake drainage, Grand Creek drainage. Imagine how quick or how long it takes to drive in today's traffic and the busyness of how Missoula has grown. We have to bring resources from other stations. Stations 2, which are on Park Avenue and Mount, or Station 3 at 39th and Russell. Those units would have to respond and pick up those subsequent calls, those collision calls that I mentioned, and 50% of the time, or nearly 50% of the time, we have those collision calls occurring. So we are having to vacate areas to backfill, which perpetuates the problem and allows those response times to increase. And we're, like I mentioned, 2 to 2.5 minutes behind the national standard. Our ask, well, let me skip that. Our ask with this levy would provide 20 new firefighters to our ranks, which would staff a 6th engine company. It would also provide the funding, the capital for Station 6 construction, purchase land, and the development. It also provides stable funding source for our mobile support team and the capital to provide funding for our equipment. Our fire engines, since COVID has occurred, have doubled in cost. Before COVID, the cost of a Type 1 fire engine, the big red trucks that you see in our community, costs $500,000. Just signed a contract with Pierce Manufacturing for our next Type 1, and that is at $960,000. So in such a short time, those costs are getting out of hand, not to mention you have a 3-year wait before the delivery of those apparatus. So it's a conundrum that needs to be sorted out at some level. Our level is to hopefully provide the funding for those cost increases. We also provide for adequate funding for our firefighters to maintain a competitive wage. We're probably going to end up butting up against a situation where we're going to be competing with other municipalities around the state. Kalispell just passed a public safety levy themselves, which will add 27 firefighters to their ranks. Helena is going to the voters this June along with ourselves. Evergreen Fire, sister communities to Kalispell, just passed a levy to increase their firefighter staffing. Great Falls, they failed to pass their public safety levy to increase their firefighter staffing. Belgrade failed their levy this last fall to add firefighters to their ranks. We're at a situation where concurrently across the state, we're suffering this same problem as our Montana communities continue to grow and the calls for help and service continue to grow as well. That is the ask, and I'll turn it over to Stacie.
Okay. Okay, is this on? I think so. Can you hear me okay? All right. Well, thanks, everyone. I'm just going to quickly wrap this up. We'll turn it over to Geoff, and then we'll look forward to your questions in a little bit. And as my bio said, I was born and raised in Kalispell and was a daughter of a firefighter. So this cause is really close to my heart. And it is something that when I very first got elected, this issue was, an issue at that time. And the very first time the chief came in, not this chief, but the previous chief, came in and gave a presentation about the, funding of the fire department and their calls for service. A bright-eyed, bushy-tailed new councilwoman was like, okay, I'm going to fix this. So I marched my little self into the mayor's office and was like, well, what are we going to do about this? And proceeded to get a crash course of how incredibly complicated it would be to expand the fire department. Unlike the police department, when you add 1, 2, or 3 new officers, that actually helps the entire system because you have additional officers out in cars responding to calls. If you add 1 or 2 additional firefighters at a time, it doesn't do anything because you need an entire engine company to expand the system across the city. So 1 additional person just is going to sit there at the station. There's not, it takes 3 people to run an engine. And to really have the kind of impact that we need to get us back to where the A rating that we deserve to be, we need a 6th engine company, and that takes 20 new firefighters. And that all comes from the general fund. When you all pay your property taxes, which you all got that bill in the mail, like myself, and you see the city, it all lined out and you see city, that is what goes to the general fund. And of the $150 million city budget, the general fund is about $80 million. So it's not everything that you see. It's the general fund that we pay for fire and police is about $80 million. Police and fire make up 60% of that $80 million. We are already spending a significant, and we are not meeting the needs in our community. So it's easy to say, oh, well, just cut here and there. Well, it's pretty hard to find an additional $7 million in the general fund budget right now. And cities are being asked to do more and more and more. And as we are not getting good partners at the state level and the federal level, in 2017, the state legislature cut services for caseworkers, for folks who are suffering from mental health issues. Those people are now having to be responded to by our fire department because they have no place else to go. And the only entity that's left to sort of pick that up is the city of Missoula. And this is not a unique problem to the city of Missoula. Like Chief Hughes said, Kalispell passed a levy, they're going to double their fire department. Great Falls did not pass their fire levy, and they're in a position where they are triaging calls. And what that means is that there are cases where you call 911 and your house is on fire or your loved one is passed out and you suspect they have a heart attack, and there is no one to come respond to that. That is not okay. And It is a failure of our overall taxation system. And for all of you who came to Dan Bucks's conversation, I hope you learned a whole bunch from that about how fundamentally we need to overall change our tax system. But that's not going to happen in the next legislative session or even the following one. But what we need to do right now is pass this levy. And the numbers, I figured them out for my own self, what the increase to my household would be when I vote yes on this levy. And my taxes will go up by $276 a year, and that's about $23 a month. That $23 a month is a piece of insurance, knowing that, God forbid, I have to call 911. There is a trained professional who's going to be there in time to either save my loved one or save my home, my most valuable asset and the place where it holds all of my memories. And as a city our number one goal is to provide safety, public safety. And it is unfortunate that we are now at the point where we're having to ask voters, but we don't have any other options. So I don't want to be in a situation in Missoula like they are in Great Falls. I want to be in the situation that Kalispell is in, where we're looking to expand the system and provide the life-saving resources that everyone in this community deserves. And it's going to cost a little money, but either way, it's going to cost some money, because if we don't pass this, our rating from the insurance agencies will go up and your homeowner's insurance will go up as well. That's what they're facing in Great Falls. Their ISO rating, which sounds super wonky, went up, which means that more businesses and homeowners are having to pay more in their insurance because they realize that a fire department can't get there in a timely fashion to save their structure. We don't want that in Missoula, not because it's not good practice, but it's just not the community we are. We are a community that looks out for one another. We are helpful. We are generous. The fire department are there to save us, and they're asking for our help right now, and we need to respond to that. So that is the end of my spiel, and I will give it over to Geoff to talk about the local government study, and then we'll take your questions during table talk.
Thank you, Stacie, and thank you, City Club and your sponsors for first providing this service to the public where people can come hear about things that are important and talk about them. I have roots in City Club from many years back, and it's really a great thing that we do this in Missoula. I'm here on behalf of the League of Women Voters, an organization that has its roots over 100 years ago in fighting the fight for women's suffrage and making it so that all of the women of the world can join, or the women of the country could join the men in voting and expressing their wills as citizens. And it's all voters, not only the people who are voting now, but our prospective voters, our young people who are coming up to voting age. We have programs that we try to help them understand what it's going to mean to become a voter. We also are supportive of the efforts for people who are becoming new citizens, immigrants that are becoming naturalized American citizens. It's a group of people who are smart, dedicated, and thoughtful. And if you would like to join the League of Women Voters and share that mission with us, we'd be happy to have you. Now, why are we doing a vote for local government review? If you've already examined the ballot that you got, if you're a mail-in ballot or on election day, you will see this issue on your ballot. How many of you have come to Missoula in the last 20 years? Okay, how many of you became 18 or older in the last 20 years? Okay, don't be bashful. There's nothing wrong with being young. How many came to Missoula from other states or countries? Okay. You people came from places that did not have this opportunity. Montana is unique in offering citizens the opportunity to consider and review local government if they so choose. So there's something you need to know about this. Local government review is enshrined in the Montana Constitution that was adopted in 1972. It was I think of it as our new Constitution because I was 18 years old when the Constitutional Convention met and provided the people of Montana with this new Constitution that the people adopted. One of the key values of the Constitutional Convention and the product that they had in our Constitution was that government was to be accessible and accountable to the people. That had not been our history in Montana. And with the new Constitution, that value of accessibility and accountability rings forth. One of the ways that that happens is in the vote to reconsider, or to consider, to give citizens the opportunity to consider whether or not they're going to evaluate their local government. It's found in Section 9 of Article 11 of our Constitution. Initially, every local government had to review its form of government and provide an alternative form for the people to vote on, which was done back in the 70s. And they provided that every 10 years, this vote would be presented to the electorate again. They recognized that things change, times change, needs of communities change, and they figured, why not let the people decide if they need to think about their government again and consider other ways of doing things. It happens every 10 years in every Montana county and every incorporated city and town. The people who do this work are citizens who are elected by their fellow citizens to take on the task. On your ballot, you will see there are, if you live in the city of Missoula, there will be two questions. One is for the county and one is for the city. If you don't live in the city of Missoula, you will only be asked to vote on whether to review the county form of government. The state statute requires that the county government and the city government do two things in putting this item on the ballot. One is to put forth how much in terms of finances, either in actual dollars or mills, that the local government is going to put towards the effort of local government review. And the other thing they have to do is they have to tell the citizens how many people will constitute the study commission. In the county and in the city, these variables are identical. The county has allocated that it should cost $200,000 and have 7 members of the commission, and the city followed suit, and they have also said $200,000 and 7 members on the commission. City and county, virtually the same. The mandate of the state statute is, and this is in Montana Code 7-3-172, the purpose of a study commission is to study the existing form and powers of local government. It's a ground-up review. What do we have? How do we do it? The second part of the review is to compare them with other ways that we might do things. There are several different forms of government structure for both the county and the city provided for in state statute. One of the ones that we have is charter, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Once the commission completes its work, their findings are then submitted to the voters. This commission does nothing more than the work and make a recommendation. Everything comes back to the voters. And I want to emphasize that this is an exercise about governance. It's not meant to be political. If you have a bone to pick with the city council, if you don't like the commissioners, if you don't like the mayor, vote them out of office. This is about governance. This is how we decide to govern ourselves, we the people. It's a highly democratic process. If the voters decide to review the form of local government, there are some steps that follow. We get a chance to ask what's working. How is our government doing? How is it performing? We get to ask what's not working. What holes are there in the form of government that we have that aren't meeting our needs? Is there a better way to do it? Is there a better way that we can achieve governance? Are the people fairly represented in governance? Are our elected officials, are there enough of them? Are there too many of them? Should we elect them in a different way? How should that happen? Are the services provided by our government sufficient? Are they being provided effectively and efficiently? Is there something that we might do in the form of our government to make that happen more efficiently for the people? And should our local government do more or should it do less? That's the question. And what is the role of politics in our government? It's, again, not to take a political potshot at anybody, but for example, in 1996, we asked the voters, do you want our local government elections to be partisan or nonpartisan? And we asked that question, and the people told us nonpartisan. So that's what I mean when I talk about politics. This is a roadmap to help you understand this process. We start up here at the June 2024 primary. If the voters say no, which is the red box on the right, we're done. We'll be back in 2034, 10 years later, to consider this question again. If the voters say yes, citizens can then register to run for election to be on the commission. Now, what are the qualifications to run for a local government study commission? You'd be a registered voter. A registered voter, that's all you have to be eligible to run. Now, who can't run? Elected officials. If you are an elected official, the state law says, well, you can't run to review the form of local government that you're already part of. You can't do that. That's self-serving. So if you're an elected official, you can't run. But if you're a registered voter and a citizen, you're eligible. So the register to vote, there would be a general election this November, and all those who had submitted their names in nomination to be on the study commission are subject to a vote. In 1994, the election that I'm most familiar with, there were 47 candidates, 47 people that wanted to do this work on behalf of their fellow citizens, and 7 of us were elected. Starting in 2025, the study commission will begin the review process. They will hold hearings. They will invite department heads and elected officials to come talk to them, answer their questions, and to give them information about how the government's working. And all this information is fed into this commission for them to study, to review, and then to ultimately make recommendations. That would happen in 2026 in the primary election. The recommendations of the study commission would be put before the voters. Again, the citizens are the final say on whether the recommendations of the study commission take effect. Part of what a study commission has to do is, if they're recommending changes, they have to have a transition plan to say, here's how it will work. Now let me give you a facetious example. If the city study commission said, we think it would be better if we had 2 mayors. Okay, I think that's highly facetious. But they would have to say, well, we recognize that Missoula has 1 mayor now, and how we're going to get to 2 mayors, here's how that would work. The existing mayor gets to finish that term, and then we have elections for 2, or they would say the second mayor gets elected next year. They have to explain to the people how a transition or a change would occur so that the people can be informed in making their choices. Now, if the people say no, we're done. If the voters say yes, that's the transition plan I mentioned, and the voters get to say yes, or they get to say we're done. I just want to conclude by saying this is a highly democratic process. It's meant to keep the people's hands on the reins of government. It's meant to be thoughtful. It's not meant to be contentious. It's not meant to create fights. It's meant to have people think about themselves as citizens and how they want to be governed. And I, again, just have to applaud our constitutional conventions for expressing that value in making this provision part of our Constitution. They're inviting the people to be part of the government. So, thank you.
All right, so this is the point we come to the table talk. So this is a very rich part of every City Club forum, and arguably the gist of why we're all here. We'll take about 10 minutes for each table to introduce themselves, assign a table ambassador. That's the person that's going to raise their hand and let their voice be heard for their table. Come up with a question. I will be back up here at 12:30, and we'll kick it back off. All right, so as I said at the beginning, we're committed to civil discourse, so please keep your questions respectful. And try and avoid making statements. We understand that some of the questions require a little sort of context, but we don't need a full 12-page autobiography. So please keep it concise. Get to your question as quickly as possible. You can see we've got a lot of people, and there's going to be some questions. So when asking your question, please stand up. Raise your hand if you're the chosen one at your table. And clearly state your name. Please avoid making long statements and get to your question. We'll have 2 people walking around with mics. They will hold the mic, so if you grab it, they might wrestle you. Just be cautious, okay? So with that, we might as well get started.
Hey, Nancy Picard. I'm with the Partners Hope Foundation. And our question is, with the increase in population and with the increase in development in Missoula, why have the people that are now new paying taxes and developers, why has those additions to our tax base not kept up with being able to finance something like this?
A millennial, but I am technologically challenged. Okay. Excellent question. And there's a couple different reasons. So when a new development comes in, and Dale Bickle will tackle me if I get this wrong wherever he is. So I'm going to try to do my best. When new development comes in, they're oftentimes assessed an impact fee, but that's a one-time only. And that's a good way to build a fire station or sidewalks or put in drainage, but that is not ongoing. The impact fee is a one-time fee. So in this situation, we need to find money in the ongoing budget for the additional firefighters who will be on the, we're expanding the number of frontline firefighters. So that comes out of the general fund year after year after year. And because of the way our current taxation system is in Montana, when we are only allowed to increase our taxes based on 0.5% of the inflation. So long story short, and a very complicated math equation, growth does not pay for itself in Montana in our current taxation system. And it's you get a one-time bump for that new development coming in, but then year after year after year, it only goes up incrementally in terms of the amount of money that we get into the general fund for that building or for that expansion. So. I hope that answers your question.
My apologies. Christine Littig with the Missoula Economic Partnership. We have a curiosity question. We're not sure that you can answer it, but we also want to throw it out for broader thinking. If our ISO rating continues to be poor, but we pass the levy and our ISO rating improves, when it's poor, our insurance rates go up. If it becomes better, have you heard, or is there conversation around insurance rates? Yeah, you want to, thank you, Stacie.
So currently we are sitting at an ISO rating of 3. The scale is a 1 to 10 rating, 10 being the poorest, 1 being ultimate fire protection, water supply, and 911 service. We're riding a situation where we could backslide into a 4 category if our response times continue to decline and our staffing is at a level that does not deliver adequate firefighters for the scene of a working structure fire, which the NFPA standard requires 17 firefighters. We staff at any given time within the city 15 firefighters and a battalion chief who oversees the engine companies in the day-to-day supervision of those forces. If we do better, we achieve a rating of 2, I've been told that that can equate to a 10% reduction within your insurance premiums for your fire protection.
My name is Sebastian Strauss. On the topic of the local government review, within the previous 2 periods where this review happened, which, if any, changes were identified and recommended by the commission and then voted on, approved, or denied by the citizens?
In 2014, the last occasion when this arose, the people voted to not do local government review. The time before that, in 2004, the city residents, the city voters, voted to do it, and the recommendations of that study commission came out. Unfortunately for them, it was a divided report. 5 people made a recommendation to the voters, and there was a minority report submitted by 2, and the voters just didn't want any part of that. So that recommendation was defeated as well. The county has not really done anything to change their form of government. They have what I call just a plain vanilla garden variety 3-county commission form of government, which is fairly common in Montana. The executive and the legislative function of the county are held within the 3 commissioners that we elect. We elect them from different districts, 3 different districts, but that's been pretty much the way it's been, and it's very common in Montana to have that form of county government.
But 1994, the city did a charter.
Yes, and in city, yeah, that was this document, which I consider one of Missoula's best kept secrets. People don't realize that the citizens voted to govern themselves with self-government powers in a charter form of government. It's very rarely discussed or very rarely referred to. And I think I've always been an advocate that we should have a charter day in Missoula so people would talk about the charter at least once a year. But yeah, in '94 we did the charter. Yes, it is. Yeah, it's available. You can find it on the city's website.
So this is a question regarding the local government study. In your professional opinion, what would be the most efficient, or is the most efficient form of municipal government? Oh, Philip, with the fire department. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. I will not be baited into that question. The fact of the matter is, in keeping with the spirit of the Constitution and what the authors of the Constitution wanted, that's not for any one person to decide. First of all, the voters have to want to do it, and then their elected study commission has to do that work and make a recommendation, which then the voters get to do. In my professional opinion, it's the best government is the one that the people want. I'm not going to sit and pick things apart. That would be a cheap shot. I wouldn't do that.
I have opinions, but I won't. There is no form of government that you're going to be able to create that's going to lower your taxes. So, just that's 2 bits and yeah.
I'm John Fletcher. I appreciate in Geoff's presentation that he put us through the exercise that included how many of us came to Montana in the last 10, 20 years, how many of us only turned 18 in the last 10 or 20 years. So particularly for you folks, I just wanted to make a statement. It's my, okay, I hope, well, how many of you realize, so this is going to be a question, seated to my right is Maynann Ellingson, and we are here considering the question of local government review, as Geoff said, because the 1972 Constitution, to which Maynann was a delegate and is the only person in this room, and increasingly the only person alive, who comes from those days. So this exercise we're talking about of citizen engagement and participation and seeking accountability in our government comes from that. Thank you.
Spencer Merwin, I'm with Jackson Contractor Group. Our question was very nicely stolen by this table over here. So we were batting around one, I could maybe more for clarity. You talked about the general fund, said 150 million. And then there was 80 million. We're trying to understand the actual, like, how we have to back it down into these numbers.
Right.
On that.
Okay, it is working. Okay. So sorry, that might have not been very clear. The overall city of Missoula's budget's 150 million. That encompasses the general fund, the water department, the parks district, a whole bunch of other things. The general fund is about $80 million. And the general fund is what, when you pay your property taxes and the amount that says city, that's what goes into that. And that we fund the police and the fire department and the parks department and the roads department and, you know, IT and admin out of the general fund. So I think there's a lot of misconception of like, well, the city of Missoula's budget's $150 million. You mean to tell me you can't find $7 million to fund the fire department? Well, we legally cannot take money from the water department and put it into the general fund to expand it to be able to fund the fire department. So when we were talking about $80 million is what the general fund is, and we are already at 60% of that with what we currently have for police and fire operations. You know, you look at the pie chart, all of these numbers are available on the city's website under budget. You know, where you cut, you know, the cost of asphalt has gone up 78% in the last 2 years. So we cannot fill potholes, but that's only probably going to get us about a half a firefighter. So, and because of the question that this table asked in regards to growth and, you know, your property taxes increasing and how much of that the city gets, it's capped. Even though all of us here probably saw a very significant increase in what our assessed value of our home was and what our overall tax amount that we are paying is, the actual amount of money that's going to the city is capped by the legislature at 0.5% of inflation. So that money went someplace else, and that's not what I'm here to talk to you about. But in terms of how much money goes into the general fund, we are capped, and there is not a lot of extra room to find $7 million to bring on 20 new firefighters, staff a new engine company, increase wages to make sure that we're competitive with our other municipalities, because the last thing we need is a situation which we had 10, 15 years ago, which we were getting firefighters, we were training them, putting the time and effort into getting them up to, you know, full, I don't know if there's a word for it, full-fledged And then they would go to another community because they were already all trained because the other community could pay them more. And so then it was just a cycle over and over again. And we want to recruit the best because that's what Missoulians deserve. We want the best people who are willing to run into burning buildings and save people's lives to be, on the Missoula Fire Department. Does that answer the question in a very long answer?
Quick question.
So overall 150, general fund 80, 60% of that already for police and fire.
Hi, Frank Reed. Question here is a direct question about the passage of the levy. If the fire levy passes, how big is the gap it'll close? How comprehensive is it versus being a Band-Aid? And how about the durability of it in terms of future levies required? You have some thoughts on that?
That's a really good question. I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't tell you what gap fix this, how long that would buy us time to where we're now looking at a Station 7 and accompanying workforce. I think at that point, there's going to be a different way of how we do not get to this point in the future by looking at possibly increasing those impact fees so that we do hire a firefighter or two a year so that in year 10 we have another engine company spread out over time. But we've gotten so far behind the horses on this, and we're just at a situation that we have to hire these individuals all at one time. So with a crystal ball, I would say that if Missoula was not such a desirable location for folks to relocate and live, and we stopped development at this point in time, which is totally irrational, but we could have an influx that fills the valley up tomorrow. But I don't think that's going to occur, so I can't honestly say how much time this buys us.
And the one thing that I think the chief and I have been reticent to mention is that this levy also provides permanent ongoing funding for the mobile support team. And that is a component of the fire department. So when the chief talked about that calls for service have gone up to over 12,000, that doesn't include the mobile support team. That's a numbers that they keep separate. It is? Okay, see, check. But that program, which provides mental health services to people all across our community, not just the unhoused, but the housed as well. That right now has no permanent funding base. We have basically been cobbling it together with grant funding, ARPA funding, a little bit of chewing gum and some string. And this upcoming budget, if this levy fails, I honestly am sitting here telling you I have no idea how we're going to find that money to continue to have that program. And people who have interacted with it, firefighters, police officers in this community will tell you what a great asset it is, because once they get to the scene, they stabilize it, the person needs some ongoing support, they need someone to talk to, whatever it is. That's not necessarily the job of the police officer. They have other things to do. And there are always calls happening in the community for the fire department. So having the mobile support be able to be there and give the more one-on-one services, get the person connected with whatever help they need, that's a huge benefit for our community. And we have no ongoing funding source. This levy would provide that ongoing. So that's another big key that this, in terms of gap filling, that's also very critical.
I'm Minette Johnson, and our table was interested in getting some more details about the differences, some of the line item differences between what the funding that Kalispell received and the funding that we're asking for here in Missoula. For example, the number of fire engines. Can you just go into a little bit more detail about that?
I did hear Kalispell, what they're asking. Okay. So Kalispell went with a joint public safety levy, so they also funded police officers. They're setting up another engine company. They're going to establish a third station and also provide firefighters. They run their ambulance service and transport through Kalispell Fire Department. Here in Missoula, our transport agency is Missoula Emergency Services that provide the transport side of the EMS extension from emergency to hospital care. But Kalispell runs their EMS and transport completely out of their fire department, and they will fund another ambulance company to run out of their station. Does that answer the question?
It doubles the size of the Kalispell Fire Department with this levy. Do you know what the amount was? Yeah, 4.6 million. Great Falls last fall asked for 35 million and failed. So, and obviously that's a very scary looking number, but you know, they obviously assessed that there was a significant need there.
I guess, Phil, correct me if I'm wrong, you're more familiar with Kalispell's levy ask, if that was truly for the construction of another station, or was that just personnel costs only? Because I know that 4.6 looks different than 7 million that we're asking for personnel. And
In my reading, I believe that was to cover personnel, and they may be going back when they get a station location and the design for a bond.
Article that I read, it was like 11 police officers, 27 firefighters, plus the building, plus the equipment for the building.
Oh, okay.
All in the 4.6. And that's kind of what, like ours is 7 for 20 with building and equipment. Theirs was 4.6, and they're getting 38 new people and a building and equipment. It's kind of, where's that $3 million gap? In perpetuity, of course.
So I think we're in 1.5 million to run the mobile support team. And then our equipment debt retirement for the capital, the engines. As I mentioned, cost of an engine, we have to replace those engines on a 10-year rotating schedule for the frontline engines. Our ladder trucks are nearly $2 million now. Those are on a 20-year replacement schedule. So equipment alone is a significant. I'm not sure how they're bonding their replacement up in Kalispell. That is a significant portion of this ask.
Excuse me. Maynann Ellingson. It's not clear to me whether the $7 million levy each year would result in the city being able to fund the new station, or is there a way to do capital expenditures as well as all of the other items with respect to services and equipment?
Yes, that's true. We would bond that over probably, and Bill Bickle was here, like, I believe, like a 30-year payoff for that station or longer. The earmark is a $600,000 per year portion of that $7 million to go to the construction of the new station. The debt, to retire the debt of that station.
Any other questions?
I'll ask one. So, Geoff, Dave Peppinger, I was up at the podium. I don't know if you saw me up there, but so question as far as the governmental structure. How many other counties, cities, municipalities within Montana are set up differently than ours? And how are they set up?
It would be hard for me to tell you. One of the things that has transpired over the last 50 years is the number of communities that have adopted charters or self-government powers. And there's a real simple explanation about that. The state in the statutes describe the different forms of government that municipalities, local governments can have, and they specify what officers have to be in the government and how they're arranged. Then you must do what the state says. The general idea of a self-government form of government is you can do whatever you want so long as the state doesn't tell you you can't. I always use as my example, how many people ever complain about deer and why doesn't the city do something about the deer? Well, the state owns the deer. They're state deers. They're not Missoula deer. And so the local government is prescribed from doing anything about the deer. It's the state's deer. And the state has chosen not to do anything about the deer eating your flowers. So just as another footnote, interestingly enough, for students of government, the list of things that the state has said self-government, local government can do is growing longer and longer and longer because they treat local government like the red-headed stepchild sometimes. And even though our local government, city and county, are elected by people who come to work every day, the legislature that comes for 90 days every 2 years knows better. And another thing to keep in mind is that our mayor, our county commissioners, when they get elected, get way more votes from citizens and voters than a lot of legislators do. So when we think about the balance of local government, what's responsive to the people, is the state more responsive or less responsive? There's a lot to dig into there. I'm a big, huge fan of local government. I admire everything that they do. I want our local government to be the best it can be. The league's position on this is we're not telling voters which way to vote on this question. The league wants voters to be aware of what the issue is because it comes around so infrequently. When people see it on their ballot, a lot of the newcomers are going to go, well, what the heck is this? What do you mean? People who forget, even though they voted 10 or 20 years ago, don't have a grasp of it. And so they might choose to not vote or vote no because I don't know what this is. I better vote no. So the league's position is vote however you want, but vote from a stance of being informed of what's at stake, what it means to do local government.
But we are the only of the big seven that has a strong mayor form of government. Everywhere else has a city manager and a council. So we are unique in that. In the big seven?
No, we have a charter form of government that provides for a strong mayor, but we don't have a strong mayor form of government.
We have a charter that provides for a strong mayor. The other six do not. Yes, they do not have that in their charter.
And with that, we've reached the final hour. So thank you, Geoff, Stacie, and Gordy. Hopefully everyone learned a lot. Again, thank you to our sponsors, especially First Security Bank and Blackfoot Communications. As you'll see as we run a list of our sponsors throughout the forums, please thank them for us as well. We are still in the process of working on our June forum, and so just pay attention to the website for that. And with that, enjoy your day and get out and vote.